As a mangaka at Type Moon. By X Emiya Chapter 51-60. It seems like everyone is here. Yoshikawa Daishi looked at the individuals in the room and said, I urgently made copies of this manuscript just now. Each of you take one, we'll need it for tomorrow's serialization meeting. Tomorrow. Isn't that too rushed? A team leader from one of the groups said, we already have plenty of manuscripts for this week. Normally, that would be the case, but just like how I called you all here at this time, Yoshikawa Daishi addressed everyone, this is an exceptionally outstanding manga. Is it really that exaggerated? Iwamoto Yu looked somewhat puzzled at the current situation. Although he had been called here, he had no room to interject given his status. He also didn't understand why the chief editor was in such a hurry to present Fate Zero at the serialization meeting. Alright. Let's not argue anymore. Yoshikawa Daishi stopped them and said, this is just to secure a spot at tomorrow's serialization meeting. Whether it will actually pass will depend on tomorrow. It's the end of the day today, so I won't say much more. Go back and take a good look, and we'll decide tomorrow. Also, Iwamoto Yu, please stay behind. There's something I need to discuss with you. Soon, it was time to clock out. Yoshikawa Daishi flipped through the manuscript in his hand and said to Iwamoto Yu, has Kurikawa-sensei told you which pen name he's using for this manga? Yes, he said he's using the pen name, Kuro. No, Yoshikawa Daishi immediately shook his head. Later, you'll need to call him and explain this. If this manga were to be published in other magazines, using that pen name wouldn't matter. However, if it's going to appear in Jump, then it can't be under that pen name. It's better to use Kurikawa Kazuya, or even create a completely new pen name. Huh? Why? Iwamoto Yu was momentarily puzzled. That pen name, Kuro, has already been tainted. At least in the manga he did for Battle Royale, it remained controversial until it wasn't serialized to completion. You know this. And even if it were to finish serialization, it's destined to be a mixed bag, with either side having its say. Iwamoto Yu nodded. It was indeed the case. The manga's violence, depiction of human nature, illogical elements, yet oddly realistic plot development, and its unconventional art style all supported this conclusion. Now, Weekly YOUNGJUMP is under enormous pressure because of serializing this manga. You know this too, we're flooded with complaints and even threats every day. The irony is that, without a concrete reason, cutting this manga off is a difficult decision. Currently, Weekly YOUNGJUMP is being held together by this unconventional manga. Even if it's negative news, it's still news. Until we have a new, better manga to support us, abruptly discontinuing this manga might not just cut off one series but the entire magazine. However, all this doesn't change one fact, that the pen name, Kuro, has been condemned by a portion of the readers in a short time. Yoshikawa Daishi paused for a moment and continued. So, let me explain how a reader, faced with the same manga but with a different author's pen name, might react. If this manga is released under the pen name, Kuro, then the dark atmosphere of the first chapter alone might be enough to make many readers give up on it. Especially when it comes to the experiences of the little girl, Sakura. Many might think that the manga artist, Kuro, is unchanging and continues to create disturbing content. In that case, they might abandon not just the manga but even Jump as a whole. Later, even if others say that this manga is interesting and good, it's not easy to change the initial impression. Even if they do come back, only a portion will, and the rest will be lost forever. During this process, we'll also face tremendous pressure from readers, including complaint letters. But if we use the pen name, Kurikawa Kazuya, it's a different story. First, Kurikawa-sensei's Jojo has been serialized in Jump for a while now, and the story has entered its second part. The new protagonist, Joseph Joestar, has shown a different shine compared to Jonathan and even the traditional protagonists of Jump. This shine is undoubtedly attractive, as seen in the recent rankings of Jojo. In other words, it will undoubtedly bring a lot of initial popularity to Fate Zero. Even if Jonathan died in the previous part, it was a glorious death, one that left an impression, making people sad but deeply moved. So, even if they see Sakura's experiences at the beginning, they might feel uncomfortable, but they will believe that she will be saved. After all, Kurokawa-sensei had previously ever done it in Jojo. Well, but Iwamoto Yu hesitated for a moment, but that little girl's fate, until the end. That's right, she doesn't get saved, and even the fate of the person who wants to save her can be considered quite tragic. However, at that point, most people should be immersed in the story and wouldn't have the time to come out and say these things. It's almost like manipulation. A twitch appeared at the corner of Iwamoto Yu's mouth. What if Kurokawa-sensei refuses to change? In that case, there's nothing we can do. Yoshikawa Daishi shook his head. Let me put it this way, if Fate Zero is published under the pen name Kuro, there's a possibility that readers will be deterred right from the start, and there's even a possibility of discontinuation. If a completely new pen name is used, it introduces an element of unpredictability. So, it's best to publish it under Kurokawa Kazuya or, at worst, have him create a completely new pen name. Do you understand? Yes. Iwamoto Yu nodded and said, I'll do my best. He couldn't help but admire the chief editor. The chief editor was truly experienced, having been in the manga industry for over 10 years. His vision was far more profound than someone like Iwamoto Yu, who had only been in the business for a few years. Welcome to Fanfic Audiobook, your go-to place for immersive audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. Iwamoto-san. Kazuya, who received the call, asked, is there something urgent at this hour? So, about the pen name. After hearing Iwamoto Yu's explanation, Kazuya put down the pen in his hand, leaned back in his chair, and pondered for a moment. Alright, then let's use the name, Kurokawa Kazuya. After hanging up the phone, Kazuya checked the time, pushed his chair back, and stood up. It's about time to sleep. Although he had failed yesterday, he felt that success was not far away. Now, it all depended on today. Would he succeed today? After freshening up and taking a deep breath with calm ripples, Kazuya lay down on the bed and quickly fell asleep. And then, with the previous experience, he already knew how to retrieve the stone mask as quickly as possible. Next was a rapid experiment. The stone mask is gone. Jonathan was quite puzzled. What's going on? Who took the stone mask? The stone mask. 5 years ago, his own blood had splattered onto it during his fight with Dio in the room. Afterward, the stone mask underwent a transformation. Bone spikes shot out. After some research, he deduced that it must have been an ancient execution device. When a criminal wore it, the bone spikes would pierce directly into their brain, killing them. Who could have taken it, and for what reason? He didn't understand, not at all. Could it be Dio? It had been 5 years since that incident. Over the years, Dio had changed and was no longer as menacing as before. They had become friends. However, Jonathan still couldn't shake off the feelings of doubt and fear when it came to him. Jojo rested his head on the table, deep in thought. He didn't understand, but one thing was certain. He had to retrieve the stone mask. It was a deadly weapon, and if someone were to use it for evil purposes, it would be disastrous. Thinking about it, Jojo rushed out of the room. Butler, have you seen Dio? Dio-sama should have returned just recently. Is that so? Thank you. Jojo nodded, feeling relieved in his heart. Sure enough, not long after, he saw Dio approaching from the opposite direction. What's wrong, Jojo? You look quite anxious. Dio, with a smile, adjusted his collar and walked over. Seeing Jojo's anxious expression, his inner excitement grew. "It's nothing, really. Dio, have you seen anyone entering my room recently?" Jojo thought about how to phrase it so that Dio wouldn't suspect him of doubting him. He hadn't hung the stone mask in the hallway. Instead, he had kept it in his own room after the changes occurred 5 years ago. Has something happened? Well, yeah. It seems the stone mask has gone missing. Do you recall anything? No, does it matter who took that thing? Dio said nonchalantly, but inside, he was becoming increasingly furious. His entire demeanor changed. Damn it, Jojo, is he suspecting me? He must be, suspecting that I, Dio, took the stone mask. Just wait. 2 more years, and I'll reach the legal age to inherit the estate. At that time, Jojo, I will take everything from you. It's ironic. This person who has been plotting to seize the Joestar family's fortune, ignoring the law, has maintained the #1 rank in his law class. Is that so? Jojo gritted his teeth. It would be terrible if someone really took the stone mask. Why don't you ask if anyone has been near the Joestar mansion during this time? That should provide an answer, right? You're right. Thank you, Dio. No problem. We're friends, aren't we? Shouldn't friends help each other? Dio smiled and said, but inside, he thought, go ahead and suspect me, Jojo. This time, I'll let you doubt me freely. You're someone who becomes more determined after setbacks, but this time, I'll leave you with feelings of guilt and help you find the stone mask. Then, next time, when I make my move against Sir Joestar, you won't be able to doubt me no matter what. By then, you'll remember everything that happened today, Jojo. That's great. Jojo expressed his gratitude, then looked outside. Let's get to work quickly. The sun is about to set. Hiss, hiss, hiss. Light emanated from Kazuya's room. The stone mask slowly detached from Kazuya's head. Kazuya opened his eyes. It looks like it worked. Haha. So, this amount of ripple is enough, huh? But my 5 years of accumulated ripple weren't in vain. Indeed, Kazuya hadn't acted immediately. Instead, he had spent 5 years accumulating ripple energy. And then he had meticulously distributed this ripple energy throughout his brain. Finally, he had allowed the stone mask to unlock his potential and transform him into a vampire without being overtaken by malevolence. Or rather, there was still some malevolence. Previously, it might have been 5 good, 5 evil. Now, it was probably 4 good, 6 evil. His accumulation of ripple energy was still a bit lacking. However, this was the body in his dream, and all the ripple energy he possessed in reality was not significantly less than what he had stored for 5 years here. With some more refined manipulation, he was confident that there would be no adverse effects. His room had been sealed off with windows covered except for a small hole that allowed sunlight to shine through, helping him gauge the time. It looks like the sun is about to set. Let's wait here a little longer until the sun is completely gone. It'll give me a chance to familiarize myself with my newfound power. If his calculations were correct, it wouldn't be long before the battle began. The one coming wasn't anyone else, it should be Jojo. Because, when he had stolen the stone mask, he had purposely left behind traces for Jojo to follow. Previously, I always fought as a ripple user, but this time, I want to experiment with how I, as a vampire, will battle and how I will face off against a ripple user, and the effects of the ripple hitting me. Haha. Currently, Jojo's Part 2 was still being serialized, and the collected volume of Part 1 was about to be released. Before that happened, he might be able to redraw Jojo with the experiences he had now. With the first-hand experience, he was certain he could create an even better Jojo. Excuse me, is this the home of Police Officer Jerry Copperdale? Wow, that was fast. Hearing the familiar voice, Kazuya furrowed his brows slightly. I didn't expect Jojo to act so quickly. The sun hasn't even set yet. It seems I'll need to wait a little longer. Jojo, do you feel that something is off here? Dio took a step back, looking at the mansion in front of him. He had a bad feeling, as if there was something horrifying inside these rooms. This was something he had never felt before, never experienced before. He couldn't understand it at all. What was this presence? This profound feeling seemed like it could devour his entire being. Be careful, Dio. I feel it too. Something doesn't seem right here. Jojo observed the room in front of them. The room was a typical British-style structure, but for some reason, all the windows were completely sealed shut. There was no sign of any living presence around, making it feel like a haunted house. The sun is about to set. Jojo, since we know Officer Jerry was here yesterday, can't we come back tomorrow morning? No, Jojo refused. If Officer Jerry was here, there might be some clues. Could it be? At this moment, Jojo suddenly had a troubling thought. Could it be that the culprit also saw Officer Jerry and silenced him? Dio, wait here, I'm going in to check. No, let's go together. Dio smiled and said, I wouldn't feel comfortable just letting you go in alone. Although Dio said this, in his heart, he was thinking differently. Damn you, Jojo. How dare you underestimate me? A murderer. Perfect. If there really is a murderer inside, then let him die in there. That way, I can rightfully inherit the Joestar family's estate, and no one will be able to stop me. At the same time, Jojo in his heart wondered, could I have been wrong about Dio? Maybe Dio acted that way initially because he was suddenly in a strange environment and afraid of his surroundings. Maybe he acted strong from the start because he was worried I'd bully him. But is he actually a good person? With these thoughts, Jojo felt a bit relieved and said with a smile, let's go together, Dio. As long as we're together, we can handle any situation. This had been evident in their school life. Whenever he and Dio worked together, they could win no matter what. Alright, maybe there's nothing to worry about. Officer Jerry might just be really tired and went to bed early. Well then, let's go inside, Dio said with a smile. However, deep inside, he kept cursing, die in there, Jojo, die in there. As for himself, Dio had confidence in himself. Even if there were murderers inside, he believed he could escape. No, not just escape, but defeat the other party. His plan was to make Jojo appear as if he perished with the murderer, that was his plan. But there was one condition. That condition was that there really was a murderer inside this room. Dio was waiting for his chance, waiting for the opportunity to gain control of the Joestar family's inheritance. Boom, boom. They knocked on the door, but there was no response. Jojo and Dio exchanged a glance. Even though they could be considered enemies, they strangely had perfect synergy. Dio took a step back on his own. Jojo shouted loudly and, in one swift motion, forced the locked door open. Impressive, Jojo. You truly live up to your reputation. Your explosive strength is as strong as ever, Dio commented as he took a step forward but then halted. Go 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 go. What's going on? This chill. Dio's body leaned backward, his arms shielding himself. It's so cold. A bone-chilling cold that pierces into my marrow. How can it suddenly become this cold in this season? What's happening? Is there really a murderer inside? It might be best to leave this place now. Thunk. Jojo had already entered. He walked into the room filled with the frigid atmosphere. In the next moment, Dio clenched his teeth, watching Jojo who had already entered. He tightened his fists. Damn you. Jojo. If I back out now, it means I'm inferior to this guy, inferior to this scum. It's so dark, there's no light at all. What's this? Dio bit his lip and followed Jojo inside. Suddenly, he felt like he had touched something. Bending down and looking at what was illuminated by the last rays of sunlight coming in from the doorway, he suddenly froze. The stone mask. It's the stone mask. What? The stone mask? Jojo was taken aback and hurried over. You're right, it's the stone mask. But why is the stone mask here? Humph, do we even need to say? Officer Jerry must have taken it. Well, now that we have the stone mask, let's leave, Dio said to Jojo. He felt extremely uncomfortable all over in this place, as if he were being watched by something. No, maybe that's true, but something is wrong here, Jojo said, looking around the room. This place is very wrong. The atmosphere and the fact that Officer Jerry hasn't responded until now. We went to the police station and he should have returned by now, but there's been no sound. Even the loud noise I made when I broke the door open got no response. Something's definitely wrong here. We can't just leave him behind. Dio, we have to rescue Officer Jerry. Jojo, you. Dio looked around and said, since you want to die, I won't accompany you. The atmosphere here is clearly off. You sensed the danger, yet you recklessly entered. That's not what a smart person should do. I'm leaving this place, Jojo. That's what you say, but Dio, didn't you enter too? Damn you, Jojo, for daring to mock me. No. Calm down. I need to stay calm. Dio knew his weakness very well. He was prone to anger. He had decided to change that 5 years ago, to hide his inner self, but today, he was inexplicably unable to remain calm in this eerie atmosphere. Boom boom, clattering. Rain began to pour from the sky outside, dark clouds obscuring the last remnants of the sun, with lightning flashing across the sky. It's raining, Jojo. I really don't want to stay here any longer. I'm going back, Dio said, turning away toward the door. Boom boom. What is this? Suddenly, Dio's face changed. At some point, someone was standing at the doorway. Lightning illuminated the figure, revealing it to be none other than the person they had been searching for, Jerry Copperdale. You want to leave? That's not going to happen, not at all. Come on, Dio, Jojo. Let's use you to test out the power I just obtained. You. Are you Mr. Jerry? No, wait. Who are you? Jojo turned around to look at Kazuya. No, I am Jerry. Ha, I am Jerry Copperdale, Kazuya said, revealing his current identity, his arms crossed. Jojo, and Dio, you've come at just the right time. I've just gained this power, and now I can experiment with it on both of you. But, Kazuya looked at the stone mask in Jojo's hand and launched an attack. Space Ripper Stingy Eyes. This move was originally created by Dio, and in the manga, Jonathan Joestar, that is, Jojo, perished due to this move. The key to this move was compressing the fluid in the eyes and shooting it out. It had incredible and terrifying piercing power. With a soft hiss, the fluid-formed line pierced the stone mask, shattering it and leaving a small hole in Jojo's hand. However, it only succeeded partially. While the fluid squeezed out of one eye, it didn't form the full, Space Ripper Stingy Eyes. In other words, the first experiment was only half successful. I have enough power with just myself. In case of any mishap, I must destroy the stone mask. What was this? What was that just now? Dio was stunned. That scene exceeded his understanding. What was shot from the eyes? Was it a move that humans could use? In that moment, Dio felt tremendous fear and ambition. He wanted to obtain that power. However, in the next moment, his heart went cold. From Kazuya's tone, he could tell that he had obtained that power from the stone mask, which was now destroyed. In other words, no matter what, he couldn't obtain that power anymore. You cursed fiend. Filled with an indescribable rage, he couldn't maintain his facade any longer. You damned bastard. Dio. Jojo hesitated. He had never seen Dio this angry before. Was he angry at Jerry's actions? Or was he furious about the stone mask being destroyed? Dio was about to say something when his expression suddenly changed. Kazuya rushed towards him at an incredible speed. So fast, Dio had always considered himself fast and agile, but this person in front of him was even faster. But he was still Dio, and he managed to dodge to the side at the critical moment. However, even so, the fist grazed him, though it didn't kill him outright. Arg! A large amount of blood spewed from his mouth as Dio was sent flying into the nearby wall. Countless bones in his body were broken. This guy, Dio struggled to get up, but he couldn't do it. Too weak. Pathetic, Kazuya shouted Jojo. I haven't even used half of my strength, and you're already in such a pitiful state. Haha, are humans really this weak? Jojo, can you hold on for a few seconds against me? 5 seconds. Or maybe 4 seconds. Or will you be sent flying like Dio in an instant? Kazuya felt that he was in excellent condition, completely immersed in the role he was playing. He was filled with a sense of power. It was amazing, truly wonderful. This feeling was 1,000 times more satisfying than anything he had experienced in his lifetime. Jojo was trembling. This was an existence beyond his understanding. Especially that power, it could send a person flying so far. And it didn't even have to hit directly. Could humans perform such moves? The stone mask. What did it have to do with the stone mask? Is Jerry no longer human? Jojo, this guy. Dio struggled to stand, looking at Jojo who had taken a step back, biting his lip. That guy was sending him a signal. Although it was an unfamiliar signal, after being with Jojo for so long, he understood. That guy. Jojo was telling him to escape. All right, Jojo. I'll run now. You can die here, Jojo. Dio slowly backed away, then suddenly, he looked at the entrance and stopped. Ha ha ha, Jerry. Your time is up. Dio shouted triumphantly. Huh. Kazuya turned back and saw a group of police officers rushing in. Are you Jerry? And the Joestar family's child? What happened here exactly? We heard a loud noise like a door being forced open, so we rushed over. However, due to the rain, we were a bit slower. What's going on now? The police chief looked around in confusion. Chief, there's something wrong with Jerry. He's acting really strange. Dio yelled. But he didn't need to say anything, everyone had already noticed that something was off. Kazuya moved quickly and approached the police chief, sucking his blood. What is this? It was evident that the police chief's body was rapidly withering under his grip. Fire! Fire! The other police officers panicked and started shooting at Kazuya. Kazuya didn't dodge. With his sensitivity to firearms and his current strength, he could have easily dodged them, but he didn't. Bang! 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 Bullets indeed penetrated his body, even piercing his brain. But, what is going on? He didn't die. Dio stared at Kazuya, who was clenching his fist. Cursed, Stone Mask's power, why didn't I notice it? I've been in the Joestar house for over 5 years without discovering this power. Damn, now that the stone mask is broken, I'll never have a chance to obtain this power again. Incredible power and immortality. What a perfect ability. So this is what it feels like to drink blood. It seems that the absorbed blood has transformed into life energy stored within my body. Kazuya, who understood Ripple, clearly felt that his life force was growing stronger. If he were to use Ripple right now, it would have double the effect as before. But unfortunately, he was now a vampire. The result of doubling Ripple's effect was self-destruction at twice the speed. Indeed, even vampires could use Ripple, even if it meant self-destruction. In JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Part 2, Caesar, originally a Ripple user, died in this manner after becoming a vampire. Generating ripple within oneself would turn the body into ashes. Earlier, when Kazuya used the stone mask and failed, he killed himself and woke up in the real world. However, the energy he had absorbed was not in vain, it enhanced his regenerative abilities. Thud. Throwing the body in his hand aside, Kazuya looked at the other policeman. Monsters. Plop. Jerry, you. Jojo, who had watched Jerry turn all the policemen into dry corpses, gritted his teeth. You actually killed your own former comrades. Jojo, do you think I care about that? Indeed, humans were emotional beings, but when he became a vampire, even though malice didn't increase, his emotions were still somewhat suppressed. Moreover, actually, he didn't have a good relationship with these policemen, and most of them were quite nasty. This was intentional. After all, even if emotions were suppressed, humans were still emotional creatures. If he hadn't deliberately maintained poor relationships with them and avoided getting too involved in their world, he might have been unable to go through with it. It was possible that he knew these were just illusions, products of his dreams, but he still couldn't bring himself to harm them. Although there was such a possibility, to make it easier to act when the time came, it was better not to get too attached to them from the beginning. It had to be this way. Ooh! Jojo roared, grabbing a broken door panel and swinging it towards him. Kazuya smiled, clenching his fist and throwing a punch. Arg! The door panel in Jojo's hand shattered, and he staggered back a few steps. Look here, you damn scoundrel. Dio, who had already appeared among the corpses of the policemen with a gun in hand, aimed at Kazuya and pulled the trigger. The next moment, his face became even more unpleasant. Kazuya closed his eyes. But even so, his body only swayed slightly, like something a regular human could do. The bullets were avoided. Opening his eyes, Kazuya smiled. As expected, it seems I haven't lost my touch. This instinct is still intact. Having been killed by firearms too many times, dodging them had become second nature. Whenever he sensed danger, without thinking, he would relinquish control to his instincts, allowing him to dodge the bullets. Too weak, all of you. Even your deaths have no value. Forget it. I can't test the effectiveness of my abilities in battle with you guys. I won't play with you anymore. Goodbye. Dio, stop him. Jojo, who had stood up, shouted as he watched Kazuya leave. We absolutely cannot let this monster escape. We can't allow him to harm others. I know, Dio said, nodding and raising his pistol towards Kazuya. But deep down, he wasn't thinking that way. What do you mean, don't let him escape? What a joke. I don't want to stay in his presence any longer. Get out of here, you monster. But even though he thought that way, he had to put on a show. Now that he could live, he had the leisure to do these things. With that, he pulled the trigger. Click, click, cursed, no bullets left. Where are the other guns? Dio began to pretend to search the bodies of the other policemen, but, actually, he had already taken the opportunity to remove the bullets. By the time he pulled out the second pistol, Kazuya had already disappeared. That's better. Kazuya walked through the storm. Next, he would need to continually experiment with this body's abilities, its limits, until he could wear the stone mask in the real world and immediately unleash his full power in case of an emergency. Then, through the battles he would have with Jojo and the others in the future, he could judge the effectiveness of his current abilities when facing truly powerful opponents. This was why he spared Jojo and Dio. Well, anyway, both of them had died dozens of times in his dreams for various reasons. He was already used to it. Even if he died, if he wanted to see them again, all he had to do was close his eyes and fall asleep the next day. There was no real sensation, as if he were a pile of data that could be restored at any time. Because of this, he could try different things and see various different outcomes. For example, right now, he had become the boss. So, how would Jojo and Dio react? Would Dio become a Ripple user? Perhaps in the future, he could try putting the stone mask on Jojo to see what the result would be. If it were only once or twice, he wouldn't do it, but now that he came every night, he wanted to see different developments. Of course, all of this would have to wait until he became familiar with the power of the stone mask. For now, being the boss was enough. Dio, take this. Ripple dash. Jojo shouted, his hand burning with golden light. It's useless, Jojo. If you can't hit me, it's pointless, Dio said, effortlessly dodging backward. At the same time, a belt appeared in his hand and wrapped around Jojo's arm. Look, Jojo, this is my Ripple. Crackle. Thud. Ripple on the belt, along with its power, tilted Jojo forward, and Dio delivered an elbow strike to Jojo's stomach. Watching Jojo and Dio battling not far away, Baron Zeppeli ate his sandwich. Although it had been less than a month since they started training, Jojo and Dio showed extraordinary talent in Ripple. Jojo, in particular, excelled in both the quantity and adaptability of Ripple, especially when combined with his bursts of energy, which played a crucial role in combat. On the other hand, Dio was a genius in combat, not in the traditional sense of fighting prowess but in his innovative use of Ripple. While his Ripple quantity was lower than Jojo's, their battles remained evenly matched. Dio constantly came up with unconventional applications of Ripple, developing this Ripple system further. Some of these applications were things even he had never thought of. However, what puzzled him was that the vampire had been inactive up to this point. He didn't know where it was lurking or what it was doing, which surprised him greatly. Ripple. Dio, who was fighting Jojo, was also excited. I never thought that Ripple, this extraordinary ability, existed in this world. It's fantastic, truly amazing. And according to the man named Baron Zeppeli, the weaknesses of the stone mask created vampire, like fear of the sun and Ripple, don't apply to me now. With my mastery of Ripple and the defeat of that vampire named Jerry, I'll be invincible. Plus, with Joestar's legacy, it's amazing, life in the future is truly amazing. The sky gradually darkened. All right, let's stop here for today, Baron Zeppeli said to the others. We don't know when the vampire will make a move. But once we get word of him, we must act immediately, or there may be many casualties. Yes, I understand, Master Zeppeli. Jojo nodded. His father, Sir George Joestar, had also agreed to this. According to him, the stone mask was trouble caused by the Joestar family, and they had to understand it firsthand. Which one is it? Stop. Jojo. Dio. Baron Zeppeli's forehead broke into a cold sweat as he looked at the person standing by the roadside. I never thought a vampire like you would dare to stand in front of us like this. And no. Jojo became cautious, looking at Kazuya in front of them. This guy is the vampire, Jerry. But, Master Zeppeli, you shouldn't have met him. How did you recognize him? It's his aura. This guy exudes the aura of a vampire from head to toe. Be careful, Jojo, Dio, this aren't training like before. One small mistake could be fatal. Looks like you've finished talking. Under the cover of night, Kazuya smiled, revealing his vampire fangs. It was indeed the right decision to spare you earlier. It's only been a little over a month, but you've both become quite strong. It seems you've already learned Ripple. This guy, do you know Ripple? Baron Zeppeli asked incredulously as he looked at Kazuya. HMPH, of course. Before, I was a Ripple user too. What? Well, enough talking. Let me see your current strength. Ripple cutter. Baron Zeppeli held out his hand, and a few drops of wine splattered, each carrying Ripple as they spun towards Jojo and Dio. Swish, swish, swish. Dodged. Of course, your speed is too slow to catch me. Jojo. Master Zeppeli, what's that over there? Dio suddenly pointed to the side, where it looked like a black substance on the road, a color reminiscent of thirsty blood. Huh. Baron Zeppeli rushed over to take a look, his expression changing. Yes. Danny. Speedwagon. And Master Tonpetti. Master. Dio's face changed upon hearing that word. Yes. I sent a distress signal to my former masters, informing them of what's happening here, but... Yes, they're dead. I took care of them earlier. Now it's your turn. Suddenly, Baron Zeppeli's pupils slightly contracted. Indeed, the others were dead, but his master, Master Tonpetti, was still alive. Well, it wasn't accurate to say he was alive. He had gathered all his life energy into his body using the secret technique of ripple. Wasn't that the ultimate technique of ripple? Kazuya's face suddenly changed. He jumped up. Jojo, I understand. Dio had taken advantage of the moment when Baron Zeppeli and Kazuya were distracted to launch an attack. Ripple formed several lines on the ground, quietly extending from Dio's feet towards the feet of Kazuya. The transmission of ripple through simple soil was weak. However, there were various creatures in the soil, similar to earthworms, and Dio relied on these to judge that the distance was just enough for his ripple to conduct. Sure enough, when Kazuya jumped up, his feet had already started to smoke, and ripple had indeed attacked him. Muda. Kazuya looked at the Jojo charging towards him with ripples burning on his arms and shouted. Jojo, quickly stop. Baron Zeppeli, checking the bodies of the others, noticed something was wrong and shouted hastily. But it was already too late. One of Kazuya's hands collided with Jojo's arm. The next moment, ice began to spread from the point of contact throughout Jojo's body. It's freezing. Jojo. Thud. Baron Zeppeli caught the frozen Jojo to prevent him from shattering on the ground. Then he looked at Kazuya with an unpleasant expression. Vaporizing freezing technique. This move was also invented by Dio, vaporizing the moisture within his body to freeze any opponent who touched him. It might sound highly unscientific, but it was indeed a real ability. Although he had practiced it before, he didn't expect to use it like this. That. Jojo. Dio couldn't help but feel a toothache while looking at Jojo. Luckily, it wasn't himself who got caught. But, is he really that strong? He didn't expect him to be this powerful. Fortunately, his initial attack had traveled underground. However, that was his limit. His full power attack not only consumed half of his ripple but also didn't inflict any significant damage on Kazuya. Furthermore, using the same move a second time was ineffective. His ripple was not as abundant as Jojo's, he had reached his limit. Unless, Baron Zeppeli had other preparations, but that seemed impossible. After all, the person who appeared to be his master was already dead. Huff. After placing Jojo next to his master, Tonpetti, Baron Zeppeli used the ripple breath technique and rushed towards Kazuya. Take this, Jerry. Ripple wild vortex dash. Crackle. The next moment, Baron Zeppeli's leg, which had been attacking Kazuya, was frozen. Kazuya fell silent for a moment, a fraction of a second that no one noticed, before throwing Baron Zeppeli aside. Being a boss, it was indeed tough. He had initially wanted to have a second and third round. Now it seemed like he should forget it. This would be the last time, unless he encountered that kind of person beforehand. Despite everything, this man had guided him along the path of ripple, helping him countless times. Even though Baron Zeppeli was unaware of all this now, honestly, he wasn't eager to harm him. He had thought about it before, and after a brief moment of consideration, he confirmed that he wouldn't change his mind. Then he threw Baron Zeppeli aside. What's this? Kazuya suddenly looked towards Jojo, who was nearby. The Jojo who had been completely frozen moments ago had now completely melted the ice. Not only that, his ripple was more than twice as strong as before. I see, so that old man only died just now. His vitality is truly stubborn, Kazuya remarked as he looked at the now truly fallen Tonpeti. While he was fighting Baron Zeppeli, the old man, who should have died, inexplicably resurrected and gave Jojo all of his life energy. This helped him break free from the ice, heal his injuries, and, more importantly, increase his strength significantly. Dio. Master Zeppeli. Baron Zeppeli, unable to move his legs, gritted his teeth. From just now until now, only Dio had caused some damage to Kazuya. But this was an opportunity. Although it seemed like he wasn't going to die when the prophecy said he should. It didn't matter now. He believed in Dio's potential to achieve victory. Dio, extend your hand. Huh? What? Dio, who seemed to understand what his master meant, was secretly delighted but pretended not to know. Come on, extend your hand. Baron Zeppeli forcefully pulled Dio's hand, almost coercing him. Kazuya couldn't help but focus their attention on that side, on Baron Zeppeli. This was the place where Baron Zeppeli was supposed to die in the original story. In the original work, he and Jojo arrived at the locked room where he had foreseen they would die. Since ancient times, in the room filled with the stench of death, when a child opens the door, in order to free the young lion bound by chains and send it toward the future, you will self-immolate, effecting a cruel death. And, despite remembering all of this, Baron Zeppeli still rushed forward in the presence of everything that satisfied the condition of, since ancient times, in the room filled with the stench of death, when a child opens the door, in order to free the young lion bound by chains. Finally, under the condition of being cut in half, he burned away everything, giving all his life energy to Jojo so that he could face the future. He truly lived up to the man who shouted, the hymn of mankind. But now, this, the hymn of mankind, was entrusting his golden spirit to the dark will. Entrusting it to Dio. My ultimate technique, I'm giving it to you. Dio, you must inherit my will. Ultimate Deep Pass Overdrive. In that moment, Dio felt a surge of life energy pouring into his body. Even his clothes tore apart. Dio screamed as he endured this power, finally looking at Baron Zeppeli, who had exhausted all of his life energy, falling to the ground. Damn, one after another. Despite all this, even his, born evil, heart couldn't help but feel a burst of emotion. But it lasted only for a moment, he quickly suppressed it. His ambition hadn't disappeared, but this didn't prevent one thing, his respect for Baron Zeppeli. Tisk, so unsightly, Kazuya muttered. It seemed that in the face of someone he respected, being a villain was no longer an option. This time, he came here to be masochistic. Masochism. He had had enough. Take this. Jerry. Sunset Orange Overdrive. I told you before. Muda Muda. How about adding mine? Dio said, tearing off his hair. Ripple hair attack. Swish, swish, swish. His hair, accompanied by a large amount of ripple, shot towards Kazuya like needles. Jojo concentrated all his power into his fists and swung them at Kazuya. Tisk. Kazuya, despite the situation, covered his hands in ice, with one hand protecting his faces and the other grabbing Jojo's outstretched arm. Crack, crack, crack. In an instant, ice spread along Jojo's arm. And the left hand extended by Kazuya was pierced by Dio's hair, leaving behind small holes burning with ripple. It's not over yet. Jojo didn't retract his arm. Instead, he filled his other hand with ripple and swung it at Kazuya. Not bad, not bad. But, even without hands, I still have feet. Saying that, Kazuya kicked Jojo away. Jojo! Dio shouted. In this situation, he had no confidence in winning. It was better to run. After all, how far could one person chase him? The world was vast, and he could easily evade pursuit. Dio. Jojo, held by Dio, pulled his arm and said, I'm sorry. I failed as well, now we can only rely on you, Dio. What are you saying? Please, for my father's sake. Jojo smiled, accept it, Dio. This is my final ripple. Cough, cough. In an instant, Dio once again absorbed a massive amount of ripple. However, at first, he did feel his ripple strengthening, but it didn't take long for him to sense that he had reached his limit. By the time Jojo, with his hair turned completely white, collapsed, Dio felt that his body was about to burst with an overwhelming amount of ripple. Damn it! What is this? Jerry, witness my ripple dash. In an instant, Dio found a solution. Before he exploded from the surging ripple within him, he unleashed all of the tremendous ripple energy inside his body. So, it has limits after all. Kazuya nodded, watching Dio's condition and gaining a better understanding of ripple system. It wasn't about unlimited transmission, everyone had their own limit of life energy they could bear. Otherwise, if hundreds or even thousands of people learned ripple and transmitted it to one person, that person would become explosively powerful. But now, it appeared that wasn't the case. Dio's ripple had already reached its limit. In normal circumstances, if this were the real world, Kazuya would undoubtedly have turned and fled. His vaporizing freezing technique probably wouldn't work on the current Dio. However, this was a dream world. So, he didn't care. He didn't fear anything. After all, he had died countless times in dreams and had become accustomed to it. What he needed to do now was test the limits of his abilities. Therefore, Kazuya approached. Facing the threat of the current Dio, he transcended his own limits. Space Ripper stingy eyes. The liquid within his eyes was compressed and shot out. Simultaneously, his hands were covered in ice. Vaporizing freezing technique. Poochie. The liquid from his eyes pierced Dio's chest, but at the same time, Dio's fists, surging with ripple-like explosions, collided with Kazuya's fists, coated in ice. Boom. Ooh, what is this? Kazuya stared in astonishment at everything before him. The ice on his arms gradually melted, and ripple traveled through his arms toward him. Unexpectedly, even after reaching the limit of ripple, there was still this possibility. It's not over yet, take this. Jerry, Dio yelled. As his ripple was consumed to a manageable level, in an instant, a vast amount of ripple spread from underground, extending toward Kazuya. Oh, well done. Just like that. But I won't end it so easily. Even though he was on the verge of death, Kazuya was smiling. He saw the limits of two different abilities, the various applications of these powers, and that was enough for him. Poochie. The next moment, two more Space Ripper stingy eyes pierced through Dio's throat. Ha, impossible. I'm Dio, healing. I can't heal. Dio attempted to use ripple to heal his wounds but failed. The excess ripple had been exhausted, and his damaged throat made it impossible to breathe and generate new ripple. On the ground, ripple emanating from his arms and legs had already destroyed Kazuya's entire body. He gradually turned to dust, with only a trace of consciousness remaining. His remaining consciousness didn't awaken but gazed at this space, witnessing Dio's final moments. No. It shouldn't be, my life, it just started, it should be. He said, lying on the ground, unable to get up. Dio died. Kazuya also exited the dream safely. Kazuya, who had just awakened, rubbed his head and looked at the floor of the room. Well, propagating ripple from underground, maybe I should change the carpet at home soon. Although I had a custom-made scarf before, it doesn't seem sufficient now. I should replace the floor and walls with materials that efficiently transmit ripple. Replacing everything with materials that could efficiently transmit ripple. In that case, this room would become his fortress. Once he completed this, he could send the original manuscript of Fate Zero to Tasaka Tokiomi and, of course, send his sister away first. He was prepared for it. To test whether he could enter the mystical world. Ripple. Stone Mask. It was about to reach its peak. With his current power, he didn't think he would lose to any magus. However, even if Fate Zero was serialized and no magus came to trouble him, it might indicate that there were no mysteries in this world. However, in that case, he might end up breaking ties with the Tasaka family as well. After all, portraying their daughter like that. What he did is making even himself sick. But he didn't change. He admired Tasaka Tokiomi's style. If this world didn't have any mysteries, although in that manga she's still called Sakura, how many people in all of Japan are named Sakura? A few thousand, tens of thousands, or hundreds of thousands. When he was drawing, he intentionally didn't follow the original impressions, like the hair color and the way of drawing the face. Besides the name, everything else was completely different. And if this world truly had no mysteries, he could even go on television and say that he had a good relationship with the Tasaka family, so he borrowed their identity for a bit. But he hadn't been there in a long time, and he didn't expect them to have a second child. And it just happened to be named Sakura. Then, he could smoothly change the name of the character in his book. He could also bring Tasaka Tokiomi into the picture, although he didn't know if he would agree when the time came. But this part of the content wouldn't change. Because, if this world had mysteries, if this world truly had mysteries, this should be enough. It was a reminder to himself and to Tasaka Tokiomi. If he didn't draw the original, Tasaka Tokiomi might still send it over. In that case, it should be able to save the fate of that little girl, Tasaka Sakura. If this world had no mysteries, there were many ways to remedy the situation. But if this world truly had mysteries, without a reminder, that girl's future would truly be over. But all of this was contingent on whether Tasaka Tokiomi would believe the things in the manga. He should believe it, right? But you never know. After all, the Tasaka family's tradition is dropping the ball at critical moments. However, even if that's the case, he will definitely have doubts, and that's enough. With such doubts, he wouldn't dare send his daughter to the Meitu family without investigating the situation of the Meitu family. Meitu family. Why didn't he go to the Meitu family? Well, when he first arrived, his mind wasn't quite clear, so he didn't go. Speaking of which, today is the serialization meeting, right? I wonder if Fate Zero can pass the serialization at Jump. If it's another magazine, the speed of getting into the world might slow down. And with the large audience of JUMP's readers, there might be magus among them, of course, if this world has mysteries. Not good. He forgot something. If there are truly mysteries, he didn't consider the possibility of the editorial department having magus. He didn't care about himself, but he had to send Kazumi away immediately. Phew, that's finally over. He had plenty of houses. After all, he had purchased numerous properties in Japan, mainly concentrated in Tokyo. He wasn't sure where the prices would be higher in the future, but big cities should be fine, right? As for Morio Town, he had bought some properties there, but relatively fewer. However, when a nymphomaniac moved in next door, he bought as many properties around him as possible. Of course, there were a few he didn't buy, but now he owned 6 properties in Morio. He had arranged his sister to live in the nearest one, just a street away from him. He even brought Kohana along, thinking it would be good for her to take care of his sister. And Kazumi had moved in excitedly, claiming it was to develop her independent living skills. Fortunately, his sister had always been fearless. Even after being kidnapped and brought back, she was excited and claimed she hadn't been scared at all. If her eyes hadn't been red at the time, he might have believed her. Of course, she still had to prepare her own meals every day. Next up, he could start a large-scale renovation here. He intended to turn his current residence into a fortress of Ripple. This way, regardless of whether this world had mysteries or not, his sense of security would greatly increase. Now, let's begin the serialization meeting for Weekly Shonen Jump's May issue. I'll be hosting the meeting. We have a total of 11 candidate series for serialization this time, and we'll discuss them in the order they're listed in the copies. Time passed during this process. Iwamoto Yu took a deep breath, looking at the tightly closed doors of the meeting room in the distance. Today would decide it. Whether Fate Zero could pass serialization depended on this meeting. This manga could be considered Kurokawa-sensei's transformative work, and Iwamoto Yu had no idea what he was planning. But according to him, they could discuss the plot for the next manga together. If only that were true. Once this serialization meeting was settled, he would visit Kurokawa-sensei tomorrow to see what his new manga was all about. Meanwhile, inside the meeting room. Last is Kurokawa-sensei's Fate Zero. Since this manga was added at the last minute yesterday, it's only natural that we discuss it last. This will be handled by our group's Iwamoto, said Yusuke Shoji, holding the prepared manuscript. The story revolves around 7 magus summoning famous historical heroes to engage in a battle royale for the all-powerful wish-granting device, known as the Holy Grail War. Although everyone had already seen it last night, Shoji briefly explained the plot anyway. And it was quite long, because everyone else's manga had only a few episodes at the beginning, but this one was different. They already had the complete manuscript from the start. Whether it was good or bad, whether it had potential or would collapse, could be seen at a glance. Now, please provide your feedback on this work, Shoji said, looking at the others after finishing his explanation. It's Kurokawa-sensei's manga again, commented Yudai Maruyama, pushing his glasses up and sighing. Yes, and this should be the 4th one, right? Remarked Sotaro Uemura, who was a bit plump, as he flipped through the complete manuscript. It's the same with the Kishibe Rohan Does Not Move, and Jojo's Bizarre Adventure, but it's completely different from those and the unpublished Battle Royale. What is he thinking? Well, maybe Kurokawa-sensei has always wanted to challenge himself. His output isn't a problem, everyone knows that, including this time. He submitted the complete manuscript from the start, all the way to the end, Shoji said, trying to convince them. Yoshikawa Daishi had been silent and was watching the others. That guy is a monster, Kazuhiko Toshima said as he looked at the manga. While everyone else submits about 3 episodes for the name, he brought the entire manuscript from the start, and it goes all the way to the end, 32 episodes. When you think about it, Jojo's Bizarre Adventure, and Battle Royale, were serialized too. If only Toriyama Akira Sensei had half his speed, no, even 1/5 would be great. Not only that, but there were 2 occasions when the magazine didn't have enough high-quality content, and he filled it in with Jojo. How much has that guy drawn? Asked Aozora Ishida, puzzled, as he looked at Shoji. Well, we're not entirely sure over here, but we can say he draws very quickly, and he's not the type who overworks himself. During the spring break at school not too long ago, he went on vacation for a month. Everyone knows about that, right? And during that time, Jojo, and Battle Royale, updates were business as usual. So don't worry about things like mangaka working themselves to death happening to him. Shoji once again used the prepared words. Well, regarding Kurokawa-sensei's work, his manga, Jojo, is quite popular, and its popularity has been rapidly rising since the 2nd installment without any decline despite changing the protagonist. However, did he stray from the path he started with, Battle Royale? Shonen Jump is a manga aimed at young boys, with themes of friendship, effort, and victory. But I can't see any of that in his recent 2 works, said Uemura, denying Kurokawa Kazuya's manga. He also admitted that Fate Zero was interesting. Even in terms of the plot alone, there's no manga in current Jump that can compare to this one. But editors also have their performance metrics, and this time, he brought up 2 new manga. And, in the end, only about 3 works can make it through this serialization meeting. The more they dismiss other works, the more opportunity there is. As for saying Kurokawa Kazuya have run out of talent, he can't say that because his recent manga is indeed interesting, it just doesn't fit the theme of Jump. His goal is to seize upon the fact that it doesn't fit the theme. It's true, but this manga is interesting enough, and although the content is somewhat darker compared to the manga currently in Jump, it's much better than before. And, Kurokawa-sensei also agrees that the next manga can have the editor's input to some extent. Shoji threw out his trump card. The trump card is simple, can have the editor's input to some extent. Kurokawa Kazuya's talent is undeniable. But precisely because of that, every time he submit a manuscript, it's already finished, making the editor almost invisible. And, if the editor can provide some input, can the magazine company commission him to draw some manga next? After all, judging by his speed, it shouldn't be difficult to help out with some Jump without affecting his own manga. Well, Yoshikawa Daishi fell silent for a moment and looked at the others before saying, "Is this manga interesting?" "It's interesting, I find it very interesting," said Iwamoto Yu's direct superior, Yusuke Shoji, without hesitation. "It's interesting, but..." Yudai Maruyama didn't continue, but everyone understood. "It's interesting, but the art style is somewhat impractical." "Interesting. Feels very interesting." "That's good, then," Yoshikawa Daishi nodded. "Include it. Ring, ring, ring. Ring, ring, ring. This is Kurokawa Kazuya." Kazuya answered the phone. "Yes, this is Iwamoto. Congratulations, Kurokawa-sensei, your new manga has been approved for serialization in Jump." "Yeah, I know." Iwamoto Yu paused for a few seconds. About the new manga." "Yeah, I'm ready to start working on it. You can come anytime." "Yes." Iwamoto Yu replied excitedly, then hung up the phone and found himself daydreaming for a moment. He had been so worried and anxious about the fate of the Fate Zero serialization, but when he heard Kurokawa-sensei's calm voice on the other end, it seemed like he didn't care at all. What was Kurokawa-sensei thinking? On the contrary, he was pleasantly surprised that Kurokawa-sensei had agreed to let him provide input for the new manga. On the other end of the phone, Kazuya was also somewhat pleased, although not to the same extent. He felt there was about a 70% chance that Fate Zero would be approved for serialization, up from the initial 50%. The story was solid, but the art style, which didn't conform to the current Jump trends, was a wildcard. However, the fact that it was already completed was a plus, and his ability to depict battle scenes, having witnessed many real battles, exceeded that of the average person. But those were battles of an inhuman level, and he had to rely on his imagination for much of it. Furthermore, Fate Zero clearly didn't fit the Jump style, being quite different from their usual content. If someone wanted to make an issue of it, it could be a problem. However, Iwamoto Yu's phone call from the previous day had eased some of his concerns. Changing his pen name from Kuro to Kurokawa Kazuya itself meant that the chief editor believed that using the name Kurokawa Kazuya could benefit Jump, and he would work on it accordingly. As for Iwamoto Yu, perhaps he had spent too long in that environment. Every time, he went through such nervous moments, which made him subconsciously nervous and unable to react to such matters. For the next manga, he would also need input from the editor. Because the next one he was preparing was an original manga, and it needed to embody JUMP's 3 principles: friendship, effort, and victory. He couldn't let the results of this final test dissuade him from drawing manga. Regardless, he had to continue making manga, out of love for the medium. Otherwise, what would he think up for original plots? He could simply draw all the manga he still remembered, and at his pace, it would be a simple task. Then, he could start his magazine company to make money. But in reality, he was too lazy for all that. As long as he had enough money to produce his own animations, he didn't need to manage a magazine company. He just wanted to draw the manga he loved and do what he enjoyed. And that's what he was doing now. He wanted to create an original manga he would love. Iwamoto-san is here again, the hotel receptionist said with a smile to Iwamoto-yu. Ah, yes. I have some business to attend to here tomorrow, so I came specially, Iwamoto-yu replied with a smile. Tomorrow, he would be discussing the plot and various settings for the new manga with Kurakawa-sensei. That's why he came. Considering Kurakawa-sensei's habits, he had once again traveled from Tokyo to Morio on the same day. He had become a familiar guest at the hotel nearby. Tomorrow, most elementary school students would already be in school, so he would head over directly. At night. This arrangement is fine. Over here, maybe move this chair a bit. Having just moved to the adjacent room, Kazumi were not going to sleep. Instead, she were excitedly adjusting various things in the room. Yes, she had grown up and it was time for her to live on her own. That's right, that's how it should be. She wandered around the room until she was exhausted and then lay down on the bed, sighing softly. Then, she sat up again and looked around the bedroom with a hint of embarrassment. It seems, it's not much different from before. Is it really better this way? The bedroom was the same as it had been in her previous room. Even the subtle changes were minor. The walls were cleaner than before, though. Furniture, her beloved plushies, and her familiar bed had all been moved here. Although Oni-chan said I could get new ones, I guess I'm not used to it. Yeah, this is fine. She had lived on her own before, so this meant she could do whatever she wanted. It didn't matter how things were. Hey, Kohana, do you want anything? With a room this big, do you want your own room? On the other side, Kazuya put down his brush and nodded at the completed character design in front of him. Alright, the initial design is complete. With the settings and characters in place, I can start drawing the first chapter tomorrow. By then, just like before, he should be able to enter a new dream. But he didn't know if he could bring out the knowledge of this original world, like he did with Jojo. If he could, his range of operations would greatly expand. For example, he could include some things that could be widely obtained in the story. After all, creating settings and such was his responsibility, and creating manga would be even more liberating. That night, Kazuya continued to familiarize himself with Ripple and the abilities of the stone mask within the dream of Jojo. Although doing so wouldn't increase his Ripple abilities or the like, it could enhance his mastery of Ripple and his skills with it. The next day, after sending, or rather, trailing, his sister to school and returning home, he saw a familiar face waiting at his door. Iwamoto-san, Kurakawa-sensei, you're back. How long have you been waiting here? No, I just arrived, not too long ago. Kazuya's mouth twitched slightly. Was that really necessary? They were just going to discuss the plot, after all. He had visited before, so why arrive so early?